Soon the day will arrive when we will be together, and no longer will we live in fear. And the children will smile without wondering whether on that day thunderclouds will appear. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Some will dreamed, some have died to make a bright tomorrow, and our vision remains in our hearts. Now the torch must be passed with new hope, not in sorrow, and a promise to make a new start. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me.
Lashana Tova. Happy New Year. Yes, it's the Jewish New Year until sundown this weekend. And Bashana, Havana is a song in our hymnal with words, this beautiful poem that was written in our hymnal. So looking forward to a better year. May it be so, yes? And good morning. I'm the Reverend Patricia Guthmann Haresch, but you can call me Pat, Reverend Pat. And welcome this morning. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Lancaster. Yes? Is that the right way to say it? I come up from Maryland, so I'm a foreigner, right? Lancaster. I'm learning still. So as I said, it's the Jewish New Year. We're right now for Jews in the highest of holidays in this next week. Yom Kippur is next weekend, and that's a day when we turn the page on the next year. We think of forgiveness, and it's the highest of holidays in the Jewish calendar. Also tomorrow is National AIDS and HIV/AIDS and Aging Awareness Day, to consider the special issues of those who are of an advanced age with HIV and AIDS. And in many ways, we're very thankful we've got people of advanced age with HIV and AIDS, because there was a day in which that wouldn't have been necessarily so. We're also in the midst of National Hispanic Heritage Month. And here at UUCL, we come together to nourish, nourish the spirit, to connect in love, and to act for justice. We welcome you this morning just as you are, whatever your heritage, whatever your faith, whomever you love, however you may identify. Today, you are a part of this spiritual community. And if it's your first time here or you're a newcomer, may you soon discover that this is also your spiritual home. And as has become our custom, we give a special welcome to those joining us on Zoom. The camera's right back there, so if you're on Zoom, why don't you turn your cameras on so you see each other, and we'll all wave at each other. Good morning and welcome to those who are with us on the electric highway, yes? And I want to, at this time, Elizabeth, our current acting coordinator of Lifespan Religious Education, don't you have a long title? Is that the longest title ever? We'll share a little something about the day.
So you may notice that there are some new materials at the ends of the pew. There are like pencil boxes with colored pencils and little "You Got This" tags, so you can color those or take those home and take the little cards home and hand out. Please feel free to do that during service. Also in the back, we have spirit play materials, which are meant to really make this a space that you feel you can do what you need to do to have your worship experience. So we have modeling clay, which sometimes we just need something in our hands. We also have some water boards in the back. We have pencils. You can doodle on your order of service. I always did. And so please feel free to get up, move around. There's also some sand labyrinths and other things that are in the entryway out here. So again, feel free to get up if you so need to during the service and get those materials, especially maybe as Reverend Pat is doing her wonderful interactive multimedia UU history. So thank you for that, and over to you.
The other thing to share is all ages are welcome in the space at all times. We will have a story for all ages, a moment for all ages, and families can choose to have the children stay. Families can choose for their children to continue with a special program. I don't know if there's anyone to attend the nursery this morning. There is? Okay. We will have people in the nursery, so at any time, if you want to bring your children to the nursery, that's the play area, that's open as well, just so you know that. And I'll just say it now, and we'll probably remind you again. At the end of the service, families may meet up with their children in Emerson Hall, and that's just downstairs. That's just a little different than the usual, and we'll remind you of that again. But at this time, I'd like to invite up one of our Board of Trustees, Darcy Pollock.
Thank you, Reverend Pat. I would also like to welcome you this morning. I feel so fortunate to bring a special announcement to you today. Last spring, UUCL and the UU congregation across the river in York were both preparing to search for a new part-time director of religious education. We decided to join forces so that together we could offer a shared full-time position. We attracted strong candidates, and I'm so pleased to be able to introduce you and to announce that UUCY and UUCL's new director of Lifespan Religious Education is none other than Elizabeth Guerin. So on Tuesday, she will no longer be acting. She will start as DLRE. So please share with me in giving Elizabeth a special welcome. Thank you. All are invited to celebrate with Elizabeth after this morning's service in Emerson Hall, which is right below us here. And now let us take a moment to consider this sacred space that we are now in and acknowledge the truth and land beneath and around us. We are gathered on land once inhabited by people known as the Susquehannock and Conestoga. We acknowledge the violent legacies of genocide displacement, and settlement that led us to being here today, and remind ourselves to live humbly in relation to this land and with all indigenous peoples still living and loving on this continent. May we also acknowledge that the wealth and foundation of the United States was built upon the labor and toil of enslaved people. Many indigenous people will say, we are all relatives. May we live into this truth and aspiration together.
Thank you, Darcy. And I'll try to contain my joy and excitement that Elizabeth is going to be our long-term religious educator here in with York. There'll be a lot of opportunities and possibilities because we're going to be working collaboratively with York as well. Anyway, Elizabeth, if you will light the chalice as I read these words. It is a day where we're going to talk about Unitarian and Universalist heritage. It didn't all just start in the 60s. It goes way, way, way back, and I'm just going to pull out some of the strands of the tradition to tell you a little bit about us. And so in light of that kind of thing today, that theme for the day, some words from two of our UU ministers. It is right to remember the names of those who gave us strength in this choice of living. It is right to name the power of hard lives well lived. We share a history with those lives. We belong to the same motion. They too were strengthened by what had gone before. They too were drawn on by the vision of what might come to be. Those who lived before us, who struggled for justice and suffered injustice before us, have not melted in the dust or disappeared. Their words remind us and call us back to ourselves. Their courage and love evoke our own. We, the living, carry them with us. We are their voices, their hands, and their hearts. We come this morning to rediscover the wondrous gift of free religious community, to reaffirm the way of the open mind and the full heart. May our heritage and foundation ground us and inspire us to act upon our highest aspirations today and in the future. And so let us sing. This is words from one of our UU ministers. And Eli, if you'll lead us, it's number 298 in the gray hymnal. And you can rise in as you're able or in spirit.
And since we're featuring the organ today, the first verse will be in the on the organ, and then we'll sing the three. So. Senses and hear the earth call, feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your vow, giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now, my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom
if we could invite the children and children at heart forward, we have a special surprise in our Wonder Box. I know it's so fun back there. Why would you leave? But, you know, can we lead the way up here? And then Joanna, she is going to help me with our Wonder Box this morning. So while everyone's coming up, there are a few friends that were with us yesterday. And Frankie, where were we yesterday together, you and I? Where were we at? Casimir, do you remember where we were at yesterday? We were at the apple orchard, actually. So all of us went to the apple orchard, and we picked, what would we have picked at the apple orchard? Yeah. Do you want to open up our Wonder Box? What's inside? But there's also something else inside. Yes, a book. Oh, this is a, whoa! Those are heavy apples. Oh my goodness. The barrel that I brought in yesterday was a lot bigger than this, so. Here are some of the apples that we picked. Now, why would we have picked apples, and why would we have honey? Can we have the book? And Joanna, I'll hold the mic so you can read, but how about, does everyone want to look over here? Joanna brought a book called Apples and Honey. Hey, Nyla. And she was going to share a bit about it, and I think it might tell us why we have apples and honey in our Wonder Box today.
Hi, everybody. Yes, we are going to be reading a really special story today called Apples and Honey. It's by Joan Holub, and the pictures are by Carrie Pillow. Going to learn all about this special holiday that we're doing this in honor of. So it's called Rosh Hashanah, and that's the first day of the Jewish New Year. This special holiday is celebrated in, what season is going to be coming? Oh, close. Fall, exactly. In autumn or fall. On Rosh Hashanah, we think about what has happened in the past year, and we wish for happiness, health, and peace in the new year. All right, let's turn to the next page. What are they doing in this picture? Yes, just like some of us did the other day, a great fall activity. Rosh Hashanah is here. Hooray, let's go apple picking today. Who would like to open the flap? Anybody? Ooh, awesome. Our basket is full, just like ours is today. We make some cards, we paint and glue. I send my New Year's wish to you. Ooh, and here's a fun card. Who wants to open it up? Somebody new? Oh, we can work together too.
I have a question. You just said the new year, but I'm used to the new year being in January. What do you mean the new year?
Right, so in Unitarian Universalism, we have our faiths and also neighboring faiths. So we pull from different sources. So this is the new year for the Jewish faiths. Very good question. It is time for temple. So some people who are of the Jewish faith, they'll go to temple or synagogue. And at the Unitarian Universalist Church, we talk about Rosh Hashanah and other holidays because we pull from a lot of sources. We get dressed and we want to look our very best. Ooh, we have another one to open here. Here we go. Awesome. We're almost ready. Off they go. Ooh, and here we're seeing a rabbi. That is someone at a synagogue at our church, our congregation. We have a minister. Our rabbi speaks before the crowd that blows the shofar extra loud. All right, who wants to open this one? Awesome. Ooh, how long can Dad hold the last note? I bet a pretty long time. We're back at home, we're having fun. We cook a feast for everyone. Here we go. Ooh, today our challah is round. Yes, so that's something that you may have out for Rosh Hashanah. It's dinner time, the candles shine, we pass the food, and then they're having, adults, we're having some wine, okay? Awesome, and there they all are. We dip apples in honey for a treat, like we're gonna be doing. We hope our new year will be sweet. Oh, Lashana Tova, yes, that's what some people will say for a new year. Awesome, friends, what a great story. Yes, and I just have a few words to say too, to open us into our faith development year. It's so good to be with you all. So on behalf of Faith Development, I would just like to welcome everybody to the new congregational year, and that we'll have so many opportunities for community and connection for all ages with the help of our wonderful staff and volunteers, both old and new. And we will continue to provide our inclusive religious education for our church's children and youth, focusing on our Unitarian Universalist faith and neighboring faiths, just like we did today with our Wonder Box. Thank you so much.
All right. Now, Eli, did you want us to stay and sing with you? What do you think? Or as we sing, maybe we gather our things together, because for those of you who would like to come to the playroom with Joanna and I, we are going to cut up apples to serve at the reception, and you can play too. So there's always two great things. So how about we'll start gathering that up and all. Yeah, because I need help carrying those apples. Do you think someone could carry one apple? Yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So this hymn is number 399. I'm realizing I forgot to put them on the board this morning. So number 399, and it's going to be a little tricky. So Reverend Pat is going to help me lead it. But Alan and I will demonstrate how it goes. So it goes something like this. And everyone neath the vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid. Again. And everyone neath the vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid. The second part. And into plowshares turn their swords, nations shall learn war no more. And into plowshares turn their swords, nations shall learn war no more. So that's how it goes, but it's around. And these are tricky. So I'm going to lead this side, and Reverend Pat's going to lead that side. We're going to do our best. We'll do our best. Rounds are tricky.
And do we divide at that second part?
Yeah, so once I get to the second phrase on this side, then you guys start. Right? So I'll start with this side. Ready? Ready, friends? All right. And everyone neath a vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid. And everyone neath a vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid.
And everyone
into plowshares turn their swords, nations shall learn war no more. And into plowshares turn their swords, nations shall learn war no more. And everyone neath the vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid. And everyone neath the vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid.
And everyone
Neath the vine and the fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid. They can go on forever, but that's the idea. Great job, friends. Those are tricky.
service, where we go to our center, where we find our breathing and our beating heart, that stillness in our center, where we can breathe a little slower, find our feet on the earth below us, feel comfortable if you're not already. This morning I will name some joys and sorrows. Most of our worship associates are traveling today, so it's Eli and I are doing the work of the worship associate. So Eli will be holding stones, and I will first name some things we'd like to mark, joys, sorrows, complex truths. As I do, Eli will plant them in the sand, and then in a bit I'll invite you to silently leave your stones for joys and sorrows. One of the things I wanted to be sure to name this morning are many stones of sorrow for thousands who have lost their lives in Libya, and I even think of everyone worrying after those who are missing and they don't know their fate. May we think of everyone in Libya. For those of you, and this I want you to just hang on, because some of you will be a little shocked by this, because there's someone that the congregation knew and held dear who died yesterday. For those of you who remember well UUCL's winter solstice celebrations, we have a stone of great sadness as we learned of the passing of Jean Groeschel yesterday. He was in hospice for a very short time. If you remember the playing of Native American flute music and kalimba music, he'll be missed by this community and the greater community. A stone of great joy again for our congregation and for York, that Elizabeth Gowron is joining us, our staff, and will be our new Director of Lifespan Religious Education. I could have mentioned last week, but she's here this week. If you all will join me in celebrating Heather Guerin Rice's 30 years of marriage, and she just went away. She just went away to the beach, yes, for an adventure to celebrate, and she's back. Yay. And so those are just a few to name for those that are resting in your hearts. Feel free to come and plant a stone in the sand, and may you think of it like being a seed of that will shoot out tendrils of healing and compassion and joy. May it be so. You can come forward. Why don't we take a moment and find ourselves in this precious quiet moment again. Take a moment of silence and reflection to hold in our hearts those joys and sorrows, both spoken and unspoken. What rests with you today, let us hold them together in stillness for just a moment longer. So for all of you who are helping me this morning, do you have your pieces of paper ready? Okay, I got plants in the audience this morning. And Tim, yes, we had, and I wanted to start here. Among UUs all around the world, you will find within our children's education, religious education, this is a common reading that we do with the children. This one is a variation that comes from the Congregation of Ottawa. We are Unitarian Universalists. We are the Church of the Open Mind and the Loving Heart and the Helping Hands, yes? And they also say, together we care for the earth and work for peace in our world. And if you were to sum up kind of what we're all about, I think this is about the best statement ever. So I want to talk about this morning, where does this come from? Where does this come from? It comes from like a couple thousand years ago. It comes from a few hundred years ago. This idea of an open mind in religion, of trusting our own life experience, trusting and thinking about diverse sources of information, not just one authority. A loving heart, a sense of service, a sense of compassion. Not out of fear of hell. We're not doing it to get to heaven, but because it's the right thing to do. And not having just compassion for people just like me, but for everyone and everything in the whole circle of the interdependent web of life. This comes from our UU history and our forebears. So I'm just going to throw it out to you. Eli's going to do the Oprah Winfrey, and Phil Donahue, if you're old like me, you know what that means, running around with a microphone. Is it Ellen DeGeneres now, right, who runs around with a microphone? I'm just going to throw it out there and ask you, how old is Unitarian Universalism? Any ideas? You don't have to worry. You can't flunk this one. We'll love you no matter what you say, because that's who we are. Unitarian, she got the trick question. Unitarian Universalism. How old are we? Unitarian Universalism. They merged in 1961. Unitarian Universalism is 1 year younger than I am. So I was born Unitarian, but the next year I became Unitarian Universalism. So there was the Unitarians. When did they start in the U.S.? Any thoughts? Unitarians, how old were they in the U.S.? Any thoughts? So late 1700s officially. And then there were the Universalists. When did they start in the United States? Thoughts? Huh? These were two colonial movements, right, in the 1700s, Unitarians and Universalists, as denominations. People held the views before then, but they officially started, and Heather's nodding her head because she's studying all this stuff right now as a student. They started officially in the 1700s. But the word, and we can go to the next slide, Tim. The word Unitarian, any thoughts? How old? Pardon? Not Trinitarian. So the word Unitarian was first used around 1600. And then there's the word Universalist. I will share with you Unitarian, the theology, meaning we believe that there was one God, said the ancient Christian Unitarians. We believe there's one God. Jesus was a special son and philosopher of great spirit, but not God. That was way back when, in the first 300 years of Christianity. And then there were the Universalists. And they said, everybody's saved. Everybody's saved. Not just Christians. No, everybody's saved because God is so loving. God wouldn't send anybody to hell. So those are ancient Christian positions believed to be what was the majority thought with the children. There's wisdom that can be found in all the world faith traditions. And among us you will find Christians. And it was declared, Unitarianism was declared a heresy. And considering the climate of persecution, we don't really hear of Unitarian and Universalist views until near the time of the 1500s, where there's starting to be all these Protestant reformations, all these protests going on in the Christian world. Then the heretics were able to start coming out of the closet and preaching from the corner and writing things, and we had a press, and you could read all this stuff from the heretics, right? And I remember once I was having a discussion at a ministers' meeting in Boston, you know, where is the birth of Unitarianism in the United States, and I asked, you know, what are your theories about how Unitarian and Universalist views came about? And during this time of the Reformation, it was like popcorn. One place here, one place there. People started to realize maybe the Bible wasn't saying there was anything, you don't find Trinitarian language in the Bible. As a matter of fact, Erasmus, about this time, who was, what was he, a Dutch Catholic, he was studying the Bible and he found only one Trinitarian line in the Bible. And when he looked at the original texts, it was added a lot later. Just saying. So Erasmus's view is out there, right? People are starting to read this stuff. The popcorn's going. We usually say Protestantism, we pin it on when Martin Luther hammered his theses, which were his complaints against the Catholic Church in Germany, against the door, 95 complaints in the Wittenberg Cathedral in Germany emerge. And Servetes, Heather the student picked Servetes herself, Michael Servetes. I'm going to say something I think before then. Maybe not. Why don't we first hear Michael Servetes' quote, and then I'll tell you a little something more.
And his window is in that first section, the third one on the left, the one on the left. This was from on the errors of the Trinity. There is always presented to our understanding a haunting kind of confusion of three beings, by which we are forever deluded into supposing that we are thinking about God. The kingdom of heaven knows none of this nonsense. How much this tradition of the Trinity has, alas, been a laughingstock to the Mohammedans, only God knows. The Jews also shrink from giving adherence to this fancy of ours and laugh at our foolishness about the Trinity. And on account of its blasphemies, they do not believe that this is the Messiah who promised in their law.
This is the 1500s. He's writing this, right? Michael Servetes. And so he is an anti-Trinitarian. He had to run away from a lot of the Christian authorities and wedded to governmental authorities. Someday, if I haven't yet, I can give you my sermon on Michael Servetes, because he was quite a character. He was a surgeon, but also a self-learned theologian. And his book on the errors of Trinity spread to Germany, Switzerland, and northern Italy. He had a written debate going on with Protestant reformer John Calvin. He was kind of a thorn in John Calvin's side. And I used to think Servetes was a minor character, but actually he was quite a great influence in Europe. And he was such a threat to John Calvin that he had him executed. He had him burned at the stake in Geneva. And it was no small matter. The Christian world was shocked that a Christian would execute another Christian. By the mid-1500s, anti-Trinitarianism appeared in Poland and was said to have swept across Europe. It was generally believed that the minor Reformed Church of Poland grew to 300 congregations. Who would know that was a place that we're very rooted? By 1618, they eventually fell to Jesuit Catholic persecution. Faustus Socinus, we can put his slide up, was their leading theologian. So you will often hear the Polish anti-Trinitarians as being referred to as Socinians. That again, like Arians, was derogatory. Oh, you're just a Socinian, right? Socinus argued that Jesus saved humans not by dying for them, but by setting an example for them to follow, very much like the early Unitarians and Universalists. Socinian writings, actually, you can find those writings in the libraries of the founders, the colonial founders of the United States, a John Adams or a Thomas Jefferson or a Ben Franklin. Who's Socinus? We've got from his writings. This comes from, Socinus wrote a catechism for anti-Trinitarianism.
Question. You said a little before that the Lord Jesus is a man by nature. Hath he not also a divine nature? Answer. At no hand, for that is repugnant not only to sound reason, but also to the Holy Scriptures.
Thank you. So for early anti-Trinitarians and also then for Universalists, they were in the camp that Jesus was fully human, wonderful and inspired, and a moral example was the view of many. And we're talking, this is back 1500s, 1600s. The first time the term Unitarian was used was actually in Transylvania. Is that so cool? I love to say that, which is now Romania. And as I said, it was in 1600. It was, again, a derogatory term. Those Arians, those Socinians, those Unitarians, right, at the time. Leaders of the anti-Trinitarian movement traveled to Transylvania and exercised great influence there. However, Unitarianism had been developing in Transylvania before then, where our only Unitarian king and queen reigned for a short time. Did you know? We had a Unitarian king and queen. So Queen Isabella, we can put her picture up, and we have the queen who will speak for us, Eli, or actually tell the story of Queen Isabella.
A Hungarian king married a Polish princess, Isabella. Their son, John Sigismund, was born a few days before the king died of fever. To keep the crown, Isabella took her baby John to a palace in Transylvania where they declared an independent state. Isabella was declared queen and her son king. Within a few years, they were forced to surrender their crowns and return to Poland. But Isabella never gave up the fight. She and John Sigismund returned to their palace in Transylvania, where the country had been torn by conflict between Catholics and Protestants. Queen Isabella's first act was to issue a decree declaring that, quote, everyone might hold the faith of his choice, together with the new rites or the former ones, without offense to anyone. Unfortunately, she died 2 years later, leaving rule to the young King John.
So if you can imagine in Europe at that time, if I was Catholic and I was the ruler, off with the heads with the Protestants, right? Or if I was a Protestant ruler, off with the heads of the Catholics, right? But here in Transylvania, this small kingdom, they declared everyone should be able to have their own faith. And King John Sigismund, this young king, came under the influence. We can do the next slide of, sometimes you'll hear David Ferenc, or Ferenc David, or Francis David, or many different pronunciations, whether you're in Romania or English speaking. Francis David. He was a very charismatic religious leader, and King John Sigismund came under his influence. And he became the preacher for the king. David was openly anti-Trinitarian, famous for his one quote, "God is one." So if you go and see the churches back in Romania, the historical Unitarian churches, over their doors it says, "God is one." All around the room, it might say, God is one. After great debate among religious leaders in Transylvania in 1568, King Sigismund, under the influence of David, delivered the Edict of Torda. And that's our next slide. And we have some words. You'll see January 13th, 2018 marked the 450th anniversary of the Edict of Torda. And we have, who has the edict? Diane.
His Majesty, our Lord, reaffirms that in every place the preachers shall preach and explain the gospel, each according to his, should be or her, understanding
Well, not
of
at
it.
that time.
And if the congregation like it, well, if not, no one shall compel them, for their souls would not be satisfied. But they shall be permitted to keep a preacher whose teachings they approve. Therefore, none of the superintendents or others shall abuse the preachers. No one shall be reviled for his religion by anyone, according to the previous statutes, and it is not permitted that anyone should threaten anyone else by imprisonment or by removal from his post for his teaching. For faith is the gift of God. This comes from hearing, which hearing is by the word of God.
Thank you. So 1568, the Unitarians are saying everyone should have their own faith, and it's okay to have different preachers preach different things, and we're not going to imprison you for it. And that was like pretty amazing at that time. Now, even though it really was his mom, Isabella, who came up with that rule first. Of course, King John gets the credit for the first edict of religious freedom known in history. A radical statement in those days. The Transylvanian Christians stressed the human qualities of Jesus' moral and spiritual teachings, and this religious freedom and tolerance. King Sigismund died at age 31, and unfortunately, he was not succeeded by Unitarian leaders. Francis David eventually died of exposure, hunger, and disease in prison. But the Transylvanian Unitarian churches survived and persisted throughout the years of persecution, even through communism. And in our day, many of our Unitarian Universalist congregations have partnered with the old Transylvanian congregations to help them revive and thrive and come back again strong. But if you were to visit one of these congregations, you might find it a little high church, a little different. You will find that the ministers wear a high-collared cape, much like Count Dracula, and that's what scholars would wear, and so that's what they would wear. Often men and women sit on different sides of the sanctuary, so it's a little different. There's some differences, but each to their own, right? Each their own. Socinian writings from Poland were beginning, to spread around Europe. They surfaced in Holland and found their way to England. In the early 1600s, Socinian writings were burned, considered heresy in London. In the mid-1600s, during a brief relaxation of heresy laws, John Biddle, who had translated Socinian writings to English, founded anti-Trinitarian congregations in England and Wales. And of course, then he was banished from England in 1655. So from the 1500s to the 1700s, we see the hallmarks of our own Unitarian faith being developed, and this movement towards focusing on the humanity of Jesus, freedom of religious beliefs and tolerance, non-creedal positions, and pairing reason, if you can believe, reason with faith and religion. Could we put Priestley, John Priestley up? John Priestley was from England. Not only was he a very influential Unitarian in England, he discovered oxygen. did you realize oxygen had to be discovered, right? And he did a lot of experiments with oxygen. The first Unitarian church in England was established in 1774 among its congregants, not only Joseph Priestley, but Benjamin Franklin, if you've heard of him before. And Priestley became one of the most influential of the early Unitarians. Joseph Priestley, do we got a quote? Oh, it's up here, Eli. We're right up here on the side.
I thought I was being clever.
You thought you'd get ahead of yourself, but
The First General Council gave the Son the same nature with the Father. The second admitted the Holy Spirit into the Trinity. The third consigned Christ a human soul. The fourth settled the hypostatical union of the divine and human nature of Christ, and the fifth affirmed this union of the two natures constituted only one person. Requires a pretty good memory to retain these distinctions, it being a business of words only, and the ideas not concerned in it.
yeah, that's what Joseph said. And he was a proponent of religion making sense, yes? And he so inflamed the leaders of the established church that a mob ended up destroying Priestley's laboratory and home in 1791. His friend Thomas Jefferson encouraged him to come to the States, as well as Benjamin Franklin. And in 1794, Priestley did come to the United States for safety, and it helped to establish the first church in the U.S. to call itself Unitarian. And so we've gotten a lot of Unitarian history through the Reformation or after the Reformation. Universalism was happening in scattered groups across Europe as well, and it began to coalesce as a movement in England in the 1700s. And we can do John Murray as the next. In 1770, John Murray came from England to establish the first Universalist church in the U.S. It still stands in Gloucester, Massachusetts, so you can go and get lobster and visit the church in Gloucester, up in Massachusetts. And by 1790, there were enough Universalist churches and societies that they met in a convention in Philadelphia, producing the Articles of Faith. Their articles spoke out against slavery. The Southern Universalists didn't agree with it, but the Northern Universalists spoke out against slavery and were written by Benjamin Rush, one of our Universalists who signed the Declaration of Independence. He was a renowned physician. This is their first statement on allowing diversity of opinion within their congregations. Do we have the reader? There we go, an educator.
Form of church government. Whereas a great diversity of opinions has prevailed in all ages of the church upon the subjects of baptism and the Lord's Supper, as also upon the subject of confirmation, the washing of feet, love feasts, and the anointing of the sick with oil, etc., and as this diversity of opinions has often been the means of dividing Christians who were united by the same spirit in more essential articles, we agree to admit all such persons who hold the articles of our faith and maintain good works into membership, whatever their opinion may be as to the nature, form, obligation of any or all of the above-named ordinances.
Thank you. So diversity of opinion, freedom of the pulpit, these things go back to the 1700s with the Universalists as well, and before then, when they were coming from Europe. Across the street from the first Universalist Church of Gloucester still stands the Judith Sargent Murray House. I believe our next slide is Judith. John Murray was very lucky to find his way to Judith. She was the benefactor of the church, and her family's money helped build the church across the street from her house. And she was quite an independent thinker. She wrote a Universalist catechism. Apparently, if she didn't agree with what you said in the pulpit, you'd hear from her from the pew directly, yes. She was considered one of the first feminists in the colonies in the United States. I believe she was the first woman to publish a play in the United States as well, or other writings. And what else might I say about her? Why don't we go ahead and hear a great quote from Judith Sargent Murray.
I would calmly ask, is it reasonable that a candidate for immortality for the joys of heaven, an intelligent being who is to spend an eternity in contemplating the works of the deity, should at present be so degraded as to be allowed no other ideas than those suggested by the mechanism of a pudding or sewing the seams of a garment?
Yes. She was a proponent of education for women. And yeah, I wouldn't ask her to make a pudding, no, or sew a garden. William Ellery Channing is our next slide. We can't do a presentation on American Unitarianism. He's considered the father of American Unitarianism. He actually stood a little shorter than me. I think he was around 4'9". If you go today to his Arlington Street Church in Boston, you will notice there's a huge, huge pulpit, and it even can see the people in the balcony seats, because he was this big, so he had very big. Anyway, he was very respected for Boston. He was against slavery, very outspoken when it came to rights. He inspired his parishioners to start free and public education in Boston, inspired the beginning of what we know as social work today. I think a lot of William Channing, but why don't we have a quote from William Channing, a very famous sermon that was published and found its way around the United States.
Our leading principle in interpreting Scripture is this, that the Bible is a book written for men.
From the era.
Right. I was going to say humans. It says men, in the language of men/humans, and that its meaning is to be sought in the same manner as that of other books. With these views of the Bible, we feel it is our bounden duty to exercise our reason upon it perpetually, to compare, to infer, to look beyond the letter to the spirit, to seek in the nature of the subject and the aim of the writer, to make use of what is known for explaining what is difficult and for discovering new truths.
And I think we have a Channing stained glass window here as well. But he really helped to change the view of Christianity really in all of Boston. It also split many of the ministers in Boston for those who were more liberal or more conservative. Unfortunately, he died of a young age, was often quite sick. We could sit here for another hour, but I'm not going to do that to you, to raise up lots of other people. I'll just say that in the late 1800s, with these kind of influences, you will find Unitarian and Universalist leaders who were abolitionists, suffragettes, many of the leaders of the Transcendentalist movement were all UUs, Unitarian and Universalist. By 1933, a group of Midwestern Unitarians and others produced a humanist manifesto that affirmed men and women have sufficient reason and personal resources without needing a supernatural aid. A U.S. Vice President Walter Mondale's brother, what was his name? Because Walter was Fritz as well. He had a brother who was a Unitarian minister who helped to write the Humanist Manifesto. Humanism in the 1900s was a great influence for Unitarians and Universalists. Many of our congregations that started in the 50s and 60s were very much humanist. The Universalists, that was true especially for Unitarians. For the Universalists, there was a great stress on social justice as well as for Unitarians. Many times during the Unitarian and Universalist history in the U.S., they would talk to each other about merging. They did in the 1700s, the 1800s, and either separate churches or the whole denomination. And it wasn't until 1961 that they finally merged. And you will find in the 60s, I'll tell you, the Unitarian Universalist church that I grew up in the 60s, everybody was a hippie. The adults, the kids, the teens, everybody was going on marches all the time. That was very much the congregation I grew up in. And you will find Unitarians in the forefront of civil rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, animal rights, environmental issues, and so on. So may we be the faithful guardians and guided by the legacy that we have been given. Those who have lost their lives, like Servetes, we are grateful for. A legacy of applying reason and our own good sense and life experience to matters of faith and religion, spreading a message of universal love and the celebration of a diversity of opinions, of ever seeking the way of truth, knowing the imperfection of human creeds, of appreciating the awesome mystery of which we move and live and have our being. We're going to sing a hymn next that comes from William Channing Gannett. William Channing Gannett. He was named after his father's good friend and mentor, William Ellery Channing. And Gannett was a leading Midwestern Unitarian minister in the 1850s. He was a wonderful writer, and I know all about him, and I've read his stuff because he was one of the ministers that served my congregation.
I'm adding a little bit of an acoustic twist on it. So the words are all the same, the melody might be a little different, so just bear with me. It's like 95% the same. It goes like this. The morning hangs a signal upon the mountain crest, while all the sleeping valleys in silent darkness rest. From peak to peak it flashes, it laughs along the way, till the glory of the sunlight on all the land shall lie. Let's try verse 2, ready? Above the generations the lonely prophets rise, while truth flares out as day stars within their glowing eyes. And other eyes beholding are kindled from that flame, and dawn becomes a morning when prophets love proclaim. The soul is lifted moments above the drift of days, when life's great meaning breaketh in sunrise on our ways. Behold the radiant token of faith above all fear. Night shall release its splendor, that morning shall appear. Thanks, friends.
This is the time in the service when we will pass the plate and accept your offerings. And if you're in Zoom or anyone here, you can also go on the website, give a donation. You'll see with your phone on the order service, you can give it. We'll take it. Thank you, everybody. A portion of the offering will be shared this morning with Aaron's Acres. Since 1998, Aaron's Acres has provided children and young adults with disabilities opportunities, we have a head nodding, to learn and succeed through nurturing social and recreational programs regardless of abilities. So while the plates are passed, I'll be making some announcements, and the plates may now be passed. Do look always to your weekly newsletter on email, the love letter, for what's going on. Do remember you got to go to the link to get all the information in the email. If you don't get the love letter, you can look on our website or contact the office to get it. And we gratefully receive your gifts. It looks like we've received your gifts and freely given, and dedicate them to the work and aspirations of the congregation. I think we'll just go right ahead to the extinguishing of the chalice. And these words come from Universalist Hosea Ballou, a self-taught theologian and Universalist preacher from the late 1700s to early 1800s. And he said this: if we agree in love, there's no disagreement that can do us any injury. But if we do not, no other agreement can do us any good. So may we disagree in love. Very important to say these days, huh? May we disagree in love. Spirit of love, may you rule this day and all our days. May it be so.
Number 1014 in your teal hymnal, it says, "Standing on the side of love, it is answering the call of love." It's going to be tricky, but if you can't pick up on the verses right away, don't worry about it. The chorus is catchy. You certainly can stand if you would like, as you are able. It goes like this. The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide, and so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. Here we go. We are standing on the call of love, hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. Great job. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. Here we go. We are answering the call of love, and join together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we're proud to proclaim we are answering the call of love. Last verse. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. Last time, we are answering the call of love. You got it? Hands join together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. One more time. We are answering the call of love. Thank you, everyone. See you downstairs.